My name is Drew, 29 years old. And 7 years ago, my father disowned me for something I never did. He accused me of stealing $75,000 from his business, but it was actually my stepbrother Marcus who set me up. Now, after all this time, Dad discovered the truth and wants back in my life. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife ever could. Can I really trust the man who threw me away so easily? Before I dive into this emotional roller coaster, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Also, hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about family betrayal and the difficult path to forgiveness. I grew up in a peaceful suburban neighborhood just outside Philadelphia. Our house was nothing extravagant, a modest 4-bedroom colonial with a big backyard where Dad taught me to throw a baseball and build my first treehouse. Those memories are still crystal clear, like photographs I can touch and feel whenever I close my eyes. Mom was the heart of our home. She had this infectious laugh that would fill every room, and she baked the best chocolate chip cookies in the neighborhood. Everyone loved her, the kind of person who remembered every birthday and anniversary, who volunteered at school events even when she was tired from her nursing shifts. When I was 14, Mom was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer. The disease took her quickly, just 8 months from diagnosis to funeral. Dad and I were shattered. I remember him sitting on the edge of my bed night after night, as I cried myself to sleep, his own eyes, red and swollen, but determined to be strong for me. We became each other's lifeline, two survivors, clinging to a raft in a storm. For 3 years, it was just Dad and me figuring out how to live in a world without Mom. Thomas Kendrick, my father, threw himself into his construction business, growing it from a small local operation into one of the largest commercial contractors in eastern Pennsylvania. I think work was his therapy, his way of outrunning grief. Despite the long hours, he never missed my baseball games or parent-teacher conferences. He was determined not to let me feel abandoned after losing Mom. Everything changed when I was 17. Dad met Stephanie while working on a commercial development project. She was the real estate agent handling the property. Tall blonde, always perfectly dressed, with a confident smile that commanded attention. Within 6 months of dating, Dad was a different person. The heavy cloud of grief that had followed him since Mom died seemed to lift. He laughed more. He started talking about the future again. I was genuinely happy for him. 3 years of watching your only parent suffer is an eternity for a teenager. So when Dad announced they were getting married after just 8 months of dating, I supported him even though it felt rushed. I wanted his happiness more than I wanted things to stay the same. What I didn't anticipate was Marcus. Stephanie's 19-year-old son moved into our home right after the wedding. He was tall like his mother, with the same confident smile and charismatic personality. From the beginning, there was an awkwardness between us. The forced politeness of strangers suddenly expected to be brothers. "This is going to be great," Marcus said the day he moved in, unpacking a box in what had been our guest room. "Always wanted a brother." He seemed friendly enough. We found common ground talking about sports and video games. He had this easy way about him that made people like him instantly. Dad certainly did. Looking back, I should have paid more attention to the warning signs. Marcus always had the newest phone designer clothes and an impressive car for someone who worked sporadically at best. He told stories about his past that sometimes contradicted each other. Once he mentioned growing up in Boston, then later referred to his childhood home in Connecticut. Small inconsistencies that seemed meaningless at the time. The most telling sign was how quickly Marcus charmed my father. Dad, who had always been careful and measured in his judgments, accepted everything Marcus said at face value. Within months, they had inside jokes I wasn't part of. They played golf together on weekends, something Dad had tried to interest me in for years without success. I was planning to attend Penn State to study business. Dad had always talked about me joining his company after college, eventually taking over when he retired. It was our shared dream, something we had planned since I was 15. After the wedding, though, those conversations became less frequent. "The business is growing so fast," Dad would say. "Plenty of room for both you boys when the time comes." I tried to embrace our new family members. I helped Stephanie decorate for holidays in ways we hadn't since Mom died. I invited Marcus to hang out with my friends. I made genuine efforts because I wanted Dad to be proud of me, to see that I was mature enough to accept this change. But slowly, subtly, I felt myself being pushed to the periphery of Dad's life. At dinner, Stephanie would dominate conversations with stories about her day, Marcus's accomplishments, or plans for redecorating our home. Pictures of Mom that had adorned our mantel were relocated to albums and drawers. My childhood home began to feel less like mine with each passing day. Still, I told myself this was normal. Families blend and change. Growing pains are inevitable. Dad seemed happier than he had been in years, and I convinced myself that was enough. I was headed to college soon anyway. This was all part of growing up. What I could not have known then was how thoroughly Marcus was manipulating all of us, setting the stage for a betrayal that would destroy the foundation of trust between my father and me for the next 7 years. I started at Penn State the fall after Dad remarried, but unlike most of my friends, I decided to commute from home rather than live in the dorms. The decision made financial sense. Why pay for housing when our house was just 30 minutes from campus? But truthfully, part of me wanted to keep an eye on our new family dynamic. I told myself I was being protective of Dad, but maybe I was afraid of being forgotten if I left. Those first 2 years of college created an unexpected bond between Marcus and me. With both of us in our early 20s, we found ourselves hanging out more than either of us probably expected. We watched Eagles games together on Sundays, occasionally hit a few bars near campus, and even took a road trip to see a concert in Pittsburgh. "You know, Drew, you are nothing like I thought you would be," Marcus told me one night after we had a few beers. "When Mom first started dating your dad, I figured you would be this spoiled only child who would hate having to share. I just want Dad to be happy," I replied. After Mom died, I never thought I would see him smile again. Those moments felt genuine. Marcus began sharing personal stories. How his biological father abandoned them when he was just 7, his struggles in school with undiagnosed dyslexia, the series of stepfathers who came and went in his childhood. I felt for him. His life seemed to have been filled with instability, while mine, despite losing Mom, had been anchored by Dad's unwavering presence. When Marcus mentioned wanting a more stable job, I suggested he talk to Dad about working at the construction company. "You really think he would hire me?" "I do not have any experience," Marcus said, looking unusually vulnerable. "Of course he would. You are family now," I assured him. Dad not only hired Marcus, but placed him in the financial department, saying his business classes at community college made him a good fit. I was genuinely happy for him. It seemed like our blended family was finally coming together. Meanwhile, I was excelling in my business program. My GPA stayed above 3.8, and I made connections with professors who praised my work ethic. Dad seemed proud whenever I shared my achievements, though those conversations grew shorter as his business expanded rapidly, partly due to Stephanie's real estate connections, bringing in new development opportunities. During my sophomore year, I became close friends with my study partner Jason Chen. We spent countless hours preparing for exams in the library and grabbing late-night pizza afterward. Jason was the first person to voice concerns about Marcus. "Something seems off about your stepbrother Jason," said once after Marcus had stopped by campus to meet us for lunch. "The way he talks about money, it is like he is always calculating something. He had a rough childhood," I defended. "I think he just worries about financial security." "Maybe," Jason replied, but I could tell he remained unconvinced. That same year, I started dating Emma Walsh, a psychology major with bright eyes, and a laugh that reminded me a little of Mom's. Emma came from a tight-knit family and understood the complicated emotions surrounding my blended household. She became my sanctuary from the subtle tensions at home. Small incidents began occurring that in retrospect were flashing warning signs. Dad mentioned misplacing $300 from his wallet after a family dinner. Another time, Stephanie's sapphire earrings disappeared, only to reappear mysteriously in the guest bathroom. Each time, everyone shrugged it off as absent-mindedness or housekeeping oversights. What I could not ignore was how quickly Marcus advanced at the company. Within 18 months, he moved from an entry-level position to becoming Dad's assistant financial manager, a role that typically required years of experience and a completed degree. When I carefully asked Dad about it during a rare moment alone, he seemed defensive. "Marcus has a natural head for numbers, Drew, and he puts in overtime every weekend while you are focused on school." The implication stung. Of course I was focused on school. That had been our plan all along. Still, I swallowed my hurt and nodded, not wanting to create conflict. My 21st birthday marked what I now see as the last truly hopeful moment before everything fell apart. Dad hosted a barbecue in our backyard, inviting my friends from college and several family friends who had known me since childhood. As the evening wound down, Dad clinked his glass for everyone's attention. "I could not be prouder of the man Drew has become," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "In 2 years, when he graduates, both my sons will join me in the family business. We are going to build something that will last generations." He raised his glass toward Marcus and me standing together, and in that moment I believed in the future he described. Marcus clapped me on the back. Emma squeezed my hand, and everything seemed perfect. I had no idea that within 3 months I would be homeless, disowned, and fighting to stay in college without my father's support, all because of a betrayal orchestrated by the stepbrother I had grown to trust. The call came on a Wednesday afternoon during midterms week. I was in the library cramming for my corporate finance exam when Dad's name flashed on my phone screen. "You need to come to the office right now," he said, his voice colder than I had ever heard it. "Dad, I have an exam in 3 hours. Can it wait until—" "Now, Drew." He hung up. The drive to his office felt surreal. I tried calling back twice, but he didn't answer. My mind raced through possibilities. Was someone hurt? Had something happened to the business? Never once did I imagine what was actually waiting for me. When I arrived, Dad's secretary wouldn't meet my eyes, as she directed me to the conference room instead of his office. Inside, Dad sat at the head of the table, with Marcus beside him. Stephanie stood by the window, arms crossed. 2 men in suits I didn't recognize were reviewing documents. "Sit down," Dad said. No greeting, no explanation. One of the suited men introduced himself as James Wilson, the company's financial auditor. The other was Michael Barrett, their corporate attorney. The formal introductions made my stomach tighten with anxiety. "We've discovered $75,000 missing from the company's operational account," Wilson stated flatly, "transferred in 3 separate transactions over the past 2 months to an offshore account." I looked at Dad, confused about why I was there for this business issue. The expression on his face, a mixture of fury and pain, made my blood run cold. "We've traced the authorization codes," Wilson continued. "They came from your personal laptop, Drew." "What?" "That's impossible," I said, looking between them. "I don't have access to the company accounts." Marcus cleared his throat. "Actually, Drew asked me for the login information a few months ago. Said he wanted to understand the financial systems better before graduating. I thought it was admirable, so I gave it to him." His voice cracked convincingly. "I never thought he would." "I never asked you for anything." I stood up so quickly, my chair toppled backward. "Dad, this is insane. I would never steal from you." Dad slammed his fist on the table. "We found the evidence, Drew. The transfers were made from your IP address. Your laptop." "Check my laptop then." I fumbled for my backpack. The attorney nodded to Wilson, who took my computer and connected it to the conference room's projector. Within minutes, he had accessed my browser history, revealing visits to the company's banking portal on the exact dates of the transfers. "This is not possible," I whispered, watching as they pulled up cached passwords in my browser that I never created. Someone must have used my laptop when I wasn't around. "And who would that be?" Stephanie asked, speaking for the first time. "You always have that thing with you at school." "Not always," I said, desperately trying to remember. "It's been in my room at the house. Anyone could have—" "Enough," Dad roared, standing up. His face had turned deep red. "I trusted you with everything, Drew. I was building this company for you." "Dad, please." I begged, tears forming in my eyes. "Why would I steal from you? I'm about to graduate and join the company anyway. This makes no sense." For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Doubt, perhaps, but Marcus leaned forward, placing a hand on Dad's arm. "I hate to say this," Marcus said, his voice low and pained, "but Drew's been complaining about money lately. Said his friends were traveling during breaks while he couldn't afford to. Mentioned something about wanting to move out and get his own place." The lies poured out smoothly, with just enough truth mixed in to sound believable. I had mentioned wanting my own apartment after graduation, but never complained about money. "That's twisted," I shouted. "You're lying." Dad held up his hand to silence me. "The evidence is clear, Drew. The money was transferred using your credentials from your computer, and you're the only one with motive." "What motive?" I pleaded. "This is my future too." "Is it?" Stephanie interjected. "Or did you resent Marcus joining the company, worried about sharing your inheritance someday?" The accusation was so absurd, I could only stare at her in shock. When I looked back at Dad, I saw his expression had hardened completely. "I want the money returned," he said flatly. "All of it." "I don't have it, because I didn't take it." My voice cracked with emotion. Dad turned to the attorney. "File the police report." The words hit me like physical blows. "Police, Dad? You can't be serious. I'm your son." He looked at me with eyes I didn't recognize. "No son of mine would steal from me. You're not welcome in my house or my business. You have until tonight to get your things." Thomas Marcus said, affecting concern, "Maybe we shouldn't involve the police. He's family, despite everything." The performance was masterful. Marcus appearing as the reasonable, forgiving stepson while I was cast as the thief. Dad hesitated, then nodded curtly. "Fine, no police. But I want him gone today. And the tuition payments stop now." I stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. The family I had left, the father who had been my rock after Mom died, was casting me out based on lies. "Dad," I whispered, tears now streaming down my face. "Mom would never believe this of me." His face contorted with rage. "Don't you dare bring her into this. Get out of my sight." I was escorted from the building by security past employees who averted their eyes. Outside, rain poured down, soaking me as I stumbled to my car. I called Emma, barely able to speak through my sobs. She promised to meet me at the house to help pack. By nightfall, I had filled my car with whatever possessions I could fit. Clothes, textbooks, my laptop, and the few mementos of Mom I couldn't bear to leave behind. Stephanie supervised my packing, making sure I didn't take anything valuable. Marcus was conveniently absent. As I carried the last box to my car, Dad appeared in the hallway. For one hopeful moment, I thought he might have reconsidered, might have realized the absurdity of believing I would betray him. Instead, he held out his hand. "House key!" I placed it in his palm, our fingers brushing for what would be the last time in 7 years. "Dad, please. Just think about this. I would never—" "Goodbye, Drew." He turned and walked away, shoulders rigid. That night I slept in my car in a Walmart parking lot too, ashamed to call anyone for help. Rain drummed on the roof as I curled up in the back seat, surrounded by the hastily packed fragments of my former life. In the span of 6 hours, I had lost my family, my home, my financial support, and my planned future at the company. The next morning, Emma helped me move into Jason's off-campus apartment. He cleared out his storage closet, making room for a sleeping bag until we could figure out something better. Emma held me as I broke down again, the full weight of my situation crashing down. 2 days later, I made one final attempt to reach Dad. I went to his office during lunch, hoping to speak to him alone. The receptionist called security before I even reached her desk. I was escorted out, my father watching expressionlessly from his office doorway as I shouted desperate pleas for him to just listen. As the glass doors closed behind me, I realized that the father I knew was gone. The man who had taught me to ride a bike, who had held me through the darkest days after Mom's death, who had promised we would always have each other. That man had chosen to believe the worst of me without question. I was 21 years old, halfway through college, and completely on my own. The next few weeks passed in a blur of panic and desperate calculations. With no financial support, and halfway through my junior year dropping out, seemed inevitable. Jason's apartment was already cramped with 3 other guys. The sleeping bag on his floor was never meant to be more than a temporary solution. "You can stay as long as you need," Jason insisted, though I could see the strain it put on everyone. His roommates stepped over my belongings, their initial sympathy gradually wearing thin as days stretched into weeks. I took inventory of my resources, $2,000 in savings, a 10-year-old Honda Civic with 112,000 miles on it, and half a business degree. The $75,000 my father accused me of stealing would have been life-changing at that moment. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. First priority was income. I dropped to part-time student status, taking the minimum credits needed to avoid complete withdrawal. Then I cobbled together 3 jobs. Morning shifts at a coffee shop near campus, evening work at the university library, and weekend house painting with a local contractor. Between the 3, I scraped together enough to rent a tiny studio apartment in the worst part of town. A single room with peeling paint and unreliable heat. But it was mine. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. I would wake at 4:30 a.m. For the opening shift at the coffee shop, attend classes from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Work at the library until 9 p.m. Then study until I couldn't keep my eyes open. Weekends disappeared into 10-hour painting shifts that left my shoulders aching and hands cracked from chemicals. The physical exhaustion was almost a relief compared to the emotional toll. Word of my alleged theft spread quickly through our social circle. Friends I had known since freshman year stopped returning my calls. Invitations dried up. When I ran into former classmates around campus, many would suddenly remember urgent appointments elsewhere. Emma tried to stand by me. For 2 months, she visited my dismal apartment, bringing home-cooked meals and assurances that everything would work out. But the Drew she had fallen for, confident, optimistic part of a successful family, was gone, replaced by an exhausted, bitter young man who flinched at unexpected noises and burst into angry tears without warning. "I do not recognize you anymore," she finally said. One night, her own eyes wet with tears. "You will not talk to me about how you are feeling. You just work and study and sleep. I do not know how to help you." "No one can help me," I responded flatly. "This is my life now." She left that night and did not come back. I could not blame her. At 21, she should have been enjoying college life, not tied to someone else's trauma. Only Jason maintained unwavering faith in me. He would bring coffee during my library shifts, proofread my papers when I was too tired to see straight, and never once questioned my innocence. "Your father will realize the truth eventually," he would say. "Just focus on surviving until then." By some miracle, my grades didn't collapse completely. I clung to academics as the one area of my life I could still control. During a particularly difficult financial analysis class, my professor, Dr. Richardson, asked me to stay after the lecture. "You have remarkable aptitude, Drew," he said, studying me with concern, "but you look like you have not slept in months." Something about his genuine interest cracked my carefully maintained facade. Before I could stop myself, the entire story poured out. The accusation, my father's rejection, my current struggles to stay afloat. Instead of the awkward sympathy or disbelief I had come to expect, Dr. Richardson listened intently, asking occasional clarifying questions. When I finished, he didn't offer platitudes. "That is a hellish situation," he said simply, "and I believe you." Those 4 words, "I believe you," hit me with unexpected force. Besides Jason, no one had said that to me since the accusation. "I have a colleague at Meridian Construction," he continued. "They're looking for interns with financial analysis skills. The pay is better than the library, and the experience would be relevant to your degree. Would you be interested?" That conversation changed the trajectory of my life. The internship at Meridian, one of my father's competitors, gave me not just better pay, but a foot in the door of the industry I had been preparing for. My supervisor, Allison Drake, recognized my knowledge of construction finance and began giving me increasingly complex projects. "You have a natural talent for this," she told me, after I identified a significant cost-saving opportunity in one of their ongoing projects. "Have you considered specializing in sustainable construction methods? It's a growing field, with not enough qualified people." Her suggestion led me to add environmental design courses to my schedule. I discovered that eco-friendly construction methods not only reduced environmental impact, but often created significant long-term cost savings, something few traditional builders were addressing adequately. With stable income from Meridian, I was able to quit the coffee shop, though I kept the weekend painting work to build my savings. My tiny apartment remained sparse, but I slowly added small comforts. A better mattress, a desk that didn't wobble, curtains to replace the bedsheet I had tacked over the window. At Allison's urging, I began seeing a therapist through the university's sliding scale counseling program. The weekly sessions forced me to confront the abandonment trauma that had been festering since my father's rejection. "You are carrying 2 separate burdens," my therapist explained. The practical challenges of supporting yourself, which you are managing admirably, and the emotional devastation of your father's disbelief in you, we need to address both. Slowly, painfully, I began processing the grief of losing my family for the second time. The anger that had been fueling me gave way to deeper, more complicated emotions. Profound sadness for the relationship, lost fear that I might never be truly trusted again, and lingering confusion about how my father could have discarded me so easily. Graduation day arrived without ceremony. I had no family in the audience as I received my diploma, but Jason, Dr. Richardson, and Allison cheered loudly enough to momentarily fill the void. Afterward, Dr. Richardson invited us all to dinner at a restaurant I could never have afforded on my own. To new beginnings, he toasted, raising his glass, and to a young man who has demonstrated extraordinary resilience. With my degree finally complete, Meridian offered me a full-time position as a junior project manager focusing on their sustainable building initiatives. The salary wasn't extravagant, but after years of bare-bones survival, it felt like unimaginable wealth. Within a year, I had moved to a decent one-bedroom apartment, paid off my student loans, and begun building a reputation in the industry for innovative approaches to eco-friendly retrofitting. My social circle remained small but solid. Quality over quantity, as Jason often reminded me. Over the next 3 years, I continued to advance at Meridian, eventually becoming their lead sustainability consultant. I developed expertise in converting traditional structures to energy-efficient buildings, a niche that was increasingly in demand as environmental regulations tightened. At 26, I took the biggest risk since my forced independence, starting my own small contracting company, specializing in eco-friendly renovations. The business grew steadily, attracting clients who valued both environmental responsibility and long-term cost savings. Industry awards and local press coverage followed. Yet despite these professional successes, a hollow space remained. Occasionally, I would drive past my childhood home, slowing to glimpse the place where I had once belonged. Sometimes I would see Dad's car in the driveway, sometimes Marcus's. Once, I saw them working together in the front yard, laughing about something I couldn't hear. These moments would send me spiraling back into grief, reminding me that success meant little without family to share it with. The father who had once been my hero believed I was capable of betraying him. That wound never fully healed, merely scabbed over enough to function around it. Then 7 years after being cast out, everything changed again. It was a Tuesday afternoon in October, when my office phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail. Tuesday was proposal day, and I was deep in calculations for a major commercial renovation. Drew Kendrick speaking. I answered distractedly, still typing with one hand. Drew, it's Barbara. Barbara Mills. The name took a moment to register. Barbara had been my father's executive assistant for as long as I could remember, a no-nonsense woman who had known me since I was in elementary school. Barbara, I said, my fingers freezing over the keyboard. This is unexpected. I know, and I'm sorry to call out of the blue. I've been thinking about reaching out for months. Her voice sounded older, tired. I don't work for your father anymore. Left about 6 months ago. But there are things you should know. My heart rate accelerated. What things? Not over the phone. Could we meet somewhere? We arranged to meet at a coffee shop halfway between our offices. I spent the intervening hours in a fog of anxiety and curiosity, unable to focus on work. What could Barbara possibly have to tell me after all this time? She looked much the same when I spotted her at a corner table, her silver hair still pulled into a neat bun, posture impeccable. But her expression was troubled, the confident efficiency I remembered, replaced by nervous hesitation. You look well, she said, after we exchanged awkward greetings. I've followed your success from a distance. That project you did for Westfield Mall was impressive. Thank you, I replied, impatient to move beyond pleasantries. Barbara, what's this about? She folded her hands on the table, took a deep breath and began. I've suspected for years that something wasn't right about what happened to you. Small discrepancies in the financial reports, things that didn't add up. But I didn't have proof, and your father was determined to believe the worst. My throat tightened. And now everyone knows the truth. Marcus has been embezzling from the company for years, Not just that 75,000. The total is close to $1 million. The room seemed to tilt slightly. How was it discovered? Pure chance. The company switched accounting software 6 months ago. During the data migration, the new system flagged unusual patterns, regular small transfers to various accounts that had been cleverly disguised in the old system. The forensic accountants traced everything back to Marcus. Barbara explained how Marcus had been maintaining a secret gambling addiction throughout his time at the company. What started as weekend trips to Atlantic City escalated to online poker sports betting, and eventually, high-stakes games in private clubs. The $75,000 he had framed me for was just the first significant amount he had needed to cover mounting debts. The evidence against you was planted, Barbara continued. He admitted to using your laptop when you were in the shower or sleeping, had access to everything, even created a fake browser history. I sat in stunned silence, a strange mixture of vindication and renewed grief washing over me. Your father confronted him 3 weeks ago with ironclad evidence. Marcus broke down, completely admitted everything. Then he just disappeared. Emptied his bank account and left town. The police are looking for him, but he's probably in Nevada, or somewhere he can keep gambling. And my father, I managed to ask, my voice barely audible. Barbara's expression softened with pity. Destroyed. Absolutely destroyed. Thomas hasn't been the same since he learned the truth. He's hardly coming to the office. Stephanie left him right after the confrontation. Took half of everything in the divorce settlement. She claims she knew nothing about Marcus's actions, but Barbara's skeptical expression suggested otherwise. The business is struggling, she continued. Several clients have pulled their contracts after news of the financial irregularities spread. And Thomas's health has suffered. He had a minor heart attack 2 weeks ago. The news hit me like a physical blow. Despite everything, the thought of Dad suffering alone brought no satisfaction. Why are you telling me this, Barbara? I asked quietly. Because he's been trying to find the courage to contact you. He knows where you are, has known for years. Kept tabs on you through mutual acquaintances. He's too ashamed to reach out directly, but he needs to make amends before. She didn't finish the sentence. I left the coffee shop in a daze, Barbara's business card with Dad's current contact information burning a hole in my pocket. Back at my office, I couldn't focus on anything. The truth I had waited 7 years to have acknowledged was finally out, but it brought none of the relief I had imagined. 3 days later, a letter arrived at my office, handwritten on my father's personal stationery. The familiar slant of his handwriting sent a shock through my system. Druitt began simply. There are no words adequate to express the depth of my failure as your father. I believed lies over the truth written in your eyes. I abandoned the son who had never given me reason to doubt him. I have lived with this shame every day since discovering Marcus's deception, but you have lived with the consequences of my betrayal for 7 years. I don't ask or expect forgiveness. I only want you to know that I recognize the terrible injustice I committed against you. If you ever wish to speak, my door is open to you. If not, I understand completely. With profound regret and endless love, your father. I read the letter a dozen times, emotions cycling between anger, grief, vindication, and a dangerous flicker of hope. Part of me wanted to burn it to maintain the protective wall I had built around my heart. Another part, the boy who had once adored his father, yearned to bridge the chasm between us. Jason, now my company's financial officer, and still my closest friend, counseled caution. He discarded you, once he reminded me. Protect yourself, if you decide to respond. A mutual acquaintance, who still worked with my father, called to add context to Barbara's account. Your dad is a broken man, Drew, he told me. He talks about his mistake with you more than the money he lost. Says it was the worst thing he ever did. He's selling what's left of the business. His heart isn't in it anymore. For weeks, I carried the letter everywhere, unable to decide how to respond. The validation of my innocence should have been healing, but instead, it reopened wounds I thought had scarred over. 7 years of building a life without my father couldn't be erased by one letter, no matter how sincere. Then on a cold November evening, my phone rang with my father's number. I stared at my phone as it vibrated on my desk, my father's name illuminated on the screen. 7 years since I had last spoken to him. 7 years of building walls to protect myself from ever being hurt like that again. My finger hovered over the decline button. At the last possible moment, I answered. Hello. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. Drew. A single word choked with emotion. The voice was unmistakably his, yet different, older, more fragile than I remembered. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. I could hear his breathing uneven and ragged. I didn't think you would answer, he finally said. I nearly didn't. Another painful silence stretched between us. I received your letter, I said, if only to break the unbearable tension. I meant every word. His voice cracked. Drew, I know I have no right to ask, but would you? Would you be willing to meet? Just once. So I can apologize in person. My immediate instinct was to refuse to protect myself from reopening wounds that had taken years to heal. But something in his broken voice, so unlike the confident father I had known, made me hesitate. I'll think about it, I said finally. Thank you, he whispered. Whenever you're ready, wherever you want, just let me know. We ended the call shortly after, both too overwhelmed to continue. I sat motionless at my desk for nearly an hour afterward, memories flooding back in painful waves. Camping trips when I was young, his unwavering support after Mom died, the pride in his eyes at my high school graduation, all contrasted with the cold fury on his face the day he disowned me. After a week of sleepless nights and consultations with both my therapist and closest friends, I agreed to meet him at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown, far from both our offices and my childhood home. I arrived early, securing a corner table with a clear view of the door. When he walked in 10 minutes later, the sight of him stopped my breath. The tall, robust man, who had dominated every room he entered, was gone. In his place stood someone who looked 15 years older than he should. Thin-stooped, with deep lines etched around his eyes and mouth. His hair, once salt and pepper, had gone completely white. He spotted me and froze momentarily, as if gathering courage. As he approached, I noticed his hand trembling slightly. Drew, he said, remaining standing, until I gestured to the chair opposite me. Thank you for agreeing to see me. Up close, the changes were even more apparent. His eyes, the same hazel as mine, were bloodshot and sunken with dark circles beneath them. The confident businessman had been replaced by a shell of his former self. You look well, he said, after ordering coffee. I've followed your company's progress. Your work on the riverfront development was impressive. Let's not do small talk, I replied more sharply than I intended. You wanted to meet. Here I am. He nodded, accepting the rebuke. You're right. I didn't ask you here to pretend everything is normal. He took a deep breath. Drew, I failed you completely. There are no excuses for what I did. I chose to believe the worst about my own son, a son who had never given me any reason to doubt him, over-investigating properly. Why? The question that had haunted me for 7 years finally escaped. After everything we'd been through together after Mom died, how could you believe I would steal from you? Pain contorted his features. I've asked myself that every day since I learned the truth. The evidence seemed so convincing, but that's no excuse. I should have looked deeper. Should have trusted the character I had watched develop for 21 years. He rubbed his hand across his face. Marcus was manipulative in ways I never imagined possible. He played on my fears, suggested that your resentment over the remarriage might have festered. Stephanie reinforced those doubts, subtly reminding me how teenagers often act out. I was 21, not 15, I said coldly. And I had supported your marriage from the beginning. I know. Which makes my failure even more inexcusable. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. This contains all the evidence the forensic accountants found. Every transaction Marcus made, including the ones he framed you for. I thought you deserved to see it. I hesitated before taking the folder, uncertain if I wanted to revisit the details of my humiliation, but a need for complete vindication won out. I flipped through documents detailing an elaborate scheme spanning years. Fake invoices, manipulated records, and the damning evidence of how Marcus had accessed my laptop and planted false browser histories. He confessed everything when confronted. Dad continued quietly. Said the $75,000 was to cover gambling debts that had grown out of control. When there were no consequences, he kept going, getting more sophisticated with each theft. And Stephanie. His expression hardened. Claims she knew nothing. Left the day after Marcus disappeared, filed for divorce immediately. Her lawyer was remarkably prepared for someone supposedly blindsided by events. We sat in silence as I processed this information. Part of me had suspected Stephanie's involvement from the beginning, but confirmation brought little satisfaction. "I'm selling what's left of the business," Dad said after a while. "The reputation damage is too severe to recover from, and honestly, I don't have the heart for it anymore." He looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "I want you to know that I've set aside money for you, your rightful share, plus interest for all these years. It's not about buying forgiveness. It's what should have been yours all along." "I don't want your money," I said immediately. "I've built my own life, my own business." "I know you have, and I'm incredibly proud of what you've accomplished on your own." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. "But this isn't charity, Drew. It's your inheritance. What I should have been supporting you with all along." I shook my head, unwilling to discuss financial matters when so much emotional debris lay between us. "What do you want from me?" I asked bluntly. "Forgiveness? Reconciliation? What's the purpose of all this?" Dad's shoulders slumped. "I want whatever you're willing to give, even if that's nothing at all. I just needed you to hear the truth from me, to know that I recognize the magnitude of my failure." His voice broke. "You're my son, Drew. My only real family. I threw that away based on lies, and I'll regret it until my dying day." Despite my determination to remain detached, I felt the first crack in my emotional armor. The raw pain in his voice mirrored what I had carried for years. "Marcus is in Las Vegas now," Dad continued. "Police tracked him there, but haven't been able to arrest him yet. He's moving between casinos, still gambling whatever he has left." A bitter laugh escaped him. "All that money, all that destruction, just to feed an addiction he hid from everyone." We talked for nearly 3 hours, the longest conversation we'd had since before the accusation. Dad filled in the gaps of the past 7 years. The expansion of the business that had ultimately made it vulnerable to Marcus's embezzlement. Stephanie's growing influence that had isolated him from old friends. His gradual realization over the past 2 years that something wasn't right with the company finances. Through it all, I maintained an emotional distance, listening, but offering little of my own life in return. Yet with each passing minute, the father I had loved began to emerge from behind the stranger who had rejected me. Humbled and broken, but recognizable. As our meeting drew to a close, he placed a small photo album on the table. "I thought you might want these," he said hesitantly. "Pictures of your mother I found while packing up the house. Some of you as a child that you might not have copies of." I accepted the album, touched, despite myself, by this unexpected gesture. "Drew," he said, as we prepared to leave, "I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but if you could find it in your heart to allow me some small place in your life again, even just occasional coffee, it would mean everything to me." The vulnerable hope in his eyes was almost unbearable to witness. The powerful father figure of my childhood was gone, replaced by a man seeking redemption he wasn't sure he deserved. "I need time," I replied honestly. "This is a lot to process." "Of course," he said quickly. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." We parted awkwardly, neither certain whether to shake hands or attempt more. In the end, he simply nodded and walked away, shoulders bent under the weight of regret. Back home, I opened the photo album with trembling hands. Inside were dozens of pictures I hadn't seen in years. Mom holding me as an infant, family vacations at the beach, my Little League games. In one, Dad and I were building a treehouse, both covered in sawdust, but beaming with identical smiles. For the first time in 7 years, I allowed myself to cry freely for everything that had been lost. Not just on the day of the accusation, but in all the years that followed. The birthdays, holidays, and milestones we should have shared. The relationship that had been shattered by lies and mistrust. My girlfriend Alicia found me like that, surrounded by photographs, and finally confronting the full extent of my grief. "He wants back in my life." I told her, after recounting the meeting, "I don't know if I can trust him again. If I even want to try." Alicia, who had known me for 2 years and understood the shadows I carried, sat beside me and examined the photos. "What does your heart tell you?" she asked simply. "That I miss the father I had before all this happened," I admitted. "But that man might not exist anymore." "Or maybe he does," she suggested, gently buried under years of regret waiting for a chance at redemption. In the weeks that followed, I consulted my therapist about establishing healthy boundaries, if I decided to allow contact. I sought advice from Jason and other close friends who had witnessed my struggle firsthand. Opinions varied. Some urged caution, others encouraged reconciliation with clear limits. Finally, after nearly a month of deliberation, I called my father and agreed to a second meeting. 3 weeks after our coffee shop meeting, I invited my father to dinner at my home. It was a calculated choice. Allowing him into my space would show him the life I had built without him, while also demonstrating a willingness to lower my defenses slightly. I asked Alicia to join us, wanting both her support and her naturally perceptive judgment of character. She agreed, immediately understanding the significance of the evening. Dad arrived precisely on time, clutching a bottle of wine and a small wrapped package. The awkwardness between us remained palpable as I showed him around my modest but well-designed home. "You have a beautiful place," he said, taking in the open floor plan and the certificates of recognition displayed in my home office. "Very different from what I would have chosen, but it suits you perfectly." "I designed most of the renovations myself," I replied, a small hint of pride creeping into my voice, despite my determination to remain emotionally guarded. The previous owners had divided everything into tiny rooms. I wanted openness, natural light. During dinner, conversation remained cautious, mostly centered around neutral topics like my current projects and Alicia's work as an environmental attorney. Dad was unfailingly polite, asking thoughtful questions and listening intently to our answers, but the strain of unsaid words hung over the table. As we finished dessert, he finally handed me the wrapped package he had brought. "I found this while packing up the house," he explained. "Thought you might want it back." Inside was my mother's recipe book, a battered collection of handwritten cards and magazine clippings she had assembled throughout her life. I had assumed it lost in the chaos of my hasty departure 7 years ago. "I remembered how you used to help her bake on Sundays," Dad said quietly. "How you said her chocolate chip cookies were the one recipe you wanted to learn." The unexpected gesture, this piece of my mother, returned to me, cracked something in my careful composure. "Thank you," I managed, my voice thick with emotion. "There's more," he continued hesitantly. "Photos, keepsakes of hers. Things that should be yours, whenever you're ready." After that evening, we established a careful routine. Dinner once every 2 weeks usually, with Alicia present. Each meeting became slightly less strained than the last, though certain topics remained off-limits by unspoken agreement. During our 4th dinner, I finally asked the question that had been haunting me. "If Marcus hadn't been caught, would you ever have questioned your judgment about me?" Dad set down his fork, the pain in his eyes immediate and raw. "I've tortured myself with that same question," he admitted. "And the honest answer shames me. I don't know. I had convinced myself so thoroughly of your guilt that I stopped looking for alternatives." His honesty, however painful, was oddly refreshing, after years of feeling gaslit about my own experiences. "The worst part," he continued, "is that there were moments of doubt. Times when something didn't add up, or when I would remember your character before the accusation. But I suppressed those thoughts. It was easier to believe the lie than face the possibility I had been catastrophically wrong. These moments of painful honesty began to form the foundation of something new between us. Not the unconditional trust of before, but a more conscious relationship built on truthfulness and acknowledgement of past wrongs. 6 months into our cautious reconciliation, Dad suffered another heart attack, more serious than the first. I was listed as his emergency contact and received the call at 3 a.m. The hospital waiting room brought back visceral memories of my mother's illness. The same antiseptic smell and harsh lighting that had accompanied the worst loss of my early life. Despite our complicated history, the thought of losing my father before we had truly reconciled filled me with unexpected dread. When he stabilized and was moved to a regular room, I found myself taking charge of his care, coordinating with doctors, organizing his medications, ensuring he followed dietary restrictions after discharge. "You don't have to do this," he said weakly from his hospital bed. "After everything, you owe me nothing." "I'm not doing it because I owe you anything," I replied. "I'm doing it because, despite everything, you're still my father." During his recovery, we spent more time together than we had in the previous 7 years combined. In the quiet hours of his convalescence, conversations turned naturally to the past, not just the painful parts, but the good memories too. We reminisced about fishing trips when I was young, home improvement projects we had tackled together, inside jokes that had once been the private language of our family. Gradually, the walls I had built began to lower. Not completely. I maintained boundaries that my younger self would never have needed, but enough to allow for the possibility of a renewed relationship. 3 months after his heart attack, Dad approached me with an unexpected proposition. "I've been volunteering with a community building project in North Philly," he explained, "renovating abandoned properties for low-income families. They're understaffed and could use someone with your expertise in sustainable design." The invitation was clear, a chance to work together again, but on neutral ground. After consideration, I agreed to consult on the project one Saturday a month. The first day we worked side by side was awkward, both of us hyper-aware of the symbolic weight of rebuilding something together. But as hours passed, muscle memory took over. The familiar rhythm of measuring twice, cutting once, the shorthand communication that had once made us an efficient team. "You still hold the nail gun at that weird angle," Dad observed, with a hint of the teasing tone I remembered from childhood. "It works, doesn't it?" I replied, surprising myself with a small smile. By the end of the day, covered in sawdust and paint, we had accomplished more than either expected. The physical act of building together had bypassed some of the emotional barriers words couldn't penetrate. As the months passed, our collaboration expanded beyond the volunteer project. Dad, with his decades of experience, offered valuable insights for some of my challenging renovation projects. I, with my expertise in sustainable methods, helped him retrofit his new smaller home with energy-efficient systems. The business advice he had once hoped to give me as a young man now flowed naturally as I navigated growing my company. His network of industry contacts, still intact, despite his company's downfall, opened doors that might otherwise have remained closed. When he offered financial assistance for a major expansion of my business, creating a division specifically focused on training at-risk youth in green building techniques, I finally accepted, not as charity or reparation, but as a genuine investment in a vision we both believed in. "This is exactly the kind of innovation construction needs," he said, reviewing my business plan. "Using my money to create opportunities for kids who might otherwise fall through the cracks. It feels right." The program's success exceeded our expectations, gaining attention from industry publications and community organizations. Working with these young people, many from broken homes or challenging backgrounds, gave both of us a perspective that transcended our personal history. They remind me of what's important, Dad confessed, after a particularly rewarding day, watching a 19-year-old master a complex installation. "All the business success in the world means nothing compared to making a difference in someone's life." 2 years into our reconciliation, I asked Alicia to marry me. When she accepted, the question of family involvement arose immediately. "I'd like my father to be there," I told her, the decision having formed gradually over months. "If that's okay with you." "Of course," she replied, squeezing my hand. "He's been trying so hard, Drew. I've seen it." When I asked Dad to be my best man, the emotion that overwhelmed him was unmistakable. "I don't deserve this honor," he said, voice breaking. "Maybe not," I agreed honestly. "But I want you there, standing beside me. We've both worked hard to get to this point." The day of the wedding, as we stood side by side in matching tuxedos adjusting our ties, I caught our reflection in the mirror, the undeniable resemblance between us, the shared features that connected us beyond choice or circumstance. "Your mother would be so proud of the man you've become," Dad said quietly. "Proud of your success, yes, but more importantly, proud of your character. Your capacity for forgiveness after being deeply wronged. I haven't fully forgiven everything I admitted. I'm not sure I ever will completely. But I've learned that holding on to anger hurts me more than anyone else." He nodded, accepting this truth without argument. That's wisdom many never achieve. At the reception, Dad gave a speech that acknowledged our difficult journey without dwelling on its darkest moments. "My son has taught me more about resilience, integrity, and genuine strength than I could ever have taught him," he said, raising his glass. "Drew, watching you rebuild your life when everything was taken from you including my support, has been the greatest lesson of my life. In the years that followed, our relationship continued to evolve, not returning to what it had been before the betrayal, but transforming into something new. Something built on conscious choice rather than mere biological connection. When Alicia and I welcomed our first child 2 years later, the joy on my father's face as he held his granddaughter reflected a man grateful for a second chance he knew he hadn't earned. The lessons of those 7 years of estrangement and the difficult reconciliation that followed have shaped every aspect of my life. I learned that trust once broken can be rebuilt, but never in the same form. That forgiveness is not a single decision but a daily choice. That family can be both those we are born to and those we choose to keep in our lives. Most importantly, I learned that while we cannot control how others treat us, we alone decide what place their actions will hold in our ongoing story. My father's betrayal could have defined me, turned me bitter and untrusting for life. Instead, it became the forge that strengthened my character, that taught me to stand firmly on my own foundation. If you're watching this and struggling with family betrayal, or trying to decide whether to allow someone back into your life after they've hurt you deeply, I don't have easy answers. Every situation is unique, every relationship complex. But I can tell you that healing is possible even when the wound seems unhealable. That carefully rebuilt bridges can sometimes be stronger than those that never fell. The journey from betrayal to reconciliation is intensely personal. For me, it took 7 years of separation and 2 more of careful rebuilding. But the peace I've found was worth every painful step. Have you ever had to rebuild trust with someone who hurt you deeply? What helped you make that decision? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that healing is possible even after the deepest betrayals. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the strongest foundations are built on the ruins of what once stood before.